All right, cool. So let's go ahead and get rolling. Real quick, my name is Christopher Harrison. That's actually, for the most part, sort of my new role and environment. I now work at Cloud and AI on student experiences. So basically, my main role these days is focused in on both AI as well as web development, being the voice of the student back into the engineering team, and then also helping to make sure that the right resources exist. So that way, if somebody wakes up one morning and goes, hey, I want to figure out how to deploy a Python app into Azure App Services, that we can make sure that there's something that somebody could actually learn from there. Prior to that, I was in CSE, which stands for Commercial Software Engineering. And I never know what any of the TLAs stand for. TLA is a 3-letter acronym. Okay. You know, I'm glad that you're here just to heckle me. That's fantastic. But no, seriously. Prior to this, I worked at CSA, where my main role was actually to work hand in hand with partners, helping them solve their problems using our technology, and again, being that same voice back into engineering. Now, what I want to talk about is very specifically LUIS, or natural language processing at a higher level. And where you're most commonly going to see natural language processing is, of course, when you're working with a bot. And I think before we get into anything at all with LUIS, it's appropriate to take a step back and talk just a little bit about what a bot is. And at the end of the day, a bot is simply an app. And if you listen to any long presentation that I'll do on bot framework, the thing that I'll keep reiterating over and over and over again is the fact that a bot is just an app. It's just an app with a different interface. That when we think about a simple little example here, our little Bureau of Licensing, where somebody can send in a message and says, or the bot sends a message out rather, what can I help you with today? The user sends back, I'd like to buy a fish license. Be happy to help you. What's the first name of your fish? Eric. Seems like a good name for a fish, right? And then the bot sends back, are you renewing, or is this new? Renew, and then back and forth just like that. So that's really all that a bot is. So again, what's a bot? Well, a bot is simply a text-enabled app. And this is unfortunately where things start to get a little bit tricky. Because when I design a normal app, it's very easy. Forget the fact that that looks like it was drawn by a 4-year-old. It was actually drawn by me. It's as good as it's going to get. But if I'm creating a normal app, it's actually very easy for me to force the user's intent. That it's very easy for me to figure out what the user is trying to communicate to me. That I'm giving them a couple of different text boxes. They type in the information into there. I hopefully have some level of validation on it. And then they click on, in this case, send. And then we go ahead and we act accordingly. And what's great about this is the fact that I know, based on what information they put into which text box and what button it is they clicked on, exactly what it is they're trying to do and what information they want me to act upon. That gets very different when we're talking about a chatbot, when we're talking about allowing the user to type something in free form. So now we shift to this. Tell Larry that I'm doing a great job. Larry, by the way, was my former manager. And now what I want to be able to do is break this down into a couple of different components. At the end of the day, I still want to do the exact same thing. I still want to be able to retrieve the contact, retrieve the message, and then send that off. I'm doing the exact same thing. But how I'm going to parse the user data is what becomes a little bit different. So again, still want to call send message, but I need to figure out what we're trying to do and what data we're trying to act upon. I want to figure out what the user's intent is, and then I want to figure out the entities. And the entities are the additional pieces of information. So again, going back into that sentence, tell Larry that I'm doing a great job. Based on that, or tell really is the key word here, we're going to assume for my simple example that we're looking to send a message. And then based on the structure of the sentence from there, we're going to pick out Larry as the contact, and we're going to pick out I'm doing a great job as the message. Now that's all well and good. But as we all know, there's numerous ways that somebody can assemble a sentence. And on top of that, unlike before, again, kind of going all the way back here to my little poorly drawn app, where I could add on validation, that I could make sure that somebody has typed in the name and somebody has typed in the message. If I just give you a message box where you're going to send me some data, I have no guarantee that you're going to give me everything in one shot. So you could just simply send me something like that. And I need to be able to react to that, because that's a natural way for somebody to send that message. Send a text to Larry. So again, I'm still trying to do the same thing, but now I've got partial information. Which also then means later on, I'm going to need to follow up with the user and go, hey, what are you trying to actually send? Okay, make a U-turn. Or somebody might also say, send a message saying I'm doing a great job. So they gave me the message, but they didn't tell me who they're trying to send it to. It's a problem. Or finally, they could just simply do this, send a message. And now I know what they're trying to do, but I have no idea what the data is they're asking me to act upon. This is where LUIS comes into play. Now, LUIS stands for Language Understanding Service. And the whole job of LUIS is to help you figure out what the user is trying to say and what they're trying to do. And the way that it's going to help you here is by giving you the intent, high level, this is what the user is trying to do, and then low level, this is the individual pieces of information that we were able to break out of that sentence, and then it will also give you that information. Now, I've got more slides here, and we'll go back and take a look a bit later at some more slides. But for right now, I think we've gone long enough. Oh, hold on. You know, that gets me every time when it goes into presentation mode, and then I just switch, and so here it is, and I'm looking over here, and it's not doing anything. Boom, boom. There we go. Cool. So what I want to do is I want to try and make this as demo heavy as possible. Now, what you're also going to notice is I'm probably not going to write a whole lot of code, if any, and there's kind of a reason for that, that there's a lot of resources out there that you can go and check out Bot Framework. But when I find when I'm working with customers, when I'm working with partners and helping them build bots, this is really the #1 thing that confuses them. And you know, sometimes I'll even get asked, why is LUIS so hard? And if we stop and think about it for a second, let's examine the problem space here. This is natural language processing. This is taking how humans communicate with one another and trying to parse that out. This is science fiction. This is Star Trek. This is Hello Computer, in my worst possible Scottish accent, apparently. Star Trek 4? No? All right, moving on. Most of these pop culture references are purely for my own entertainment. So what it's trying to do is a very hard problem. Now, LUIS falls under what Microsoft calls cognitive services. And the whole goal of cognitive services is to take machine learning models and make them available to the public. And we offer a lot of great services that you can use. So for example, we've got things like translation service, we've got things like text analytics, which can give you like a sentiment score and things like that. And when you're talking about like that very basic, I shouldn't say basic, when you're talking about that very finite type of a classification, we can just give you a pre-baked model and say, here, use this. But that's not very helpful when we're trying to create an environment where you need to customize it for your own purposes. So what we're actually doing in this case is we're giving you a space where you can go in and create your own machine learning model. That is effectively what you're doing here. That if you've ever gone in and built up an ML model on your own, what you do is you go in, you give it some training data, you test it, you see how well it does, and then based on the results, you give it more testing data or more training data, test it, see the results, and then just lather, rinse, repeat, and keep going from there. LUIS is the exact same thing. You're creating a learning model. So if you're coming into LUIS and you're thinking, cool, I can give this like 5 sentences, train, go, I'm done, ship it. It's not going to work that way. It's going to take more work because you're building up a model. Okay, so with that, this is really where I want to focus in on. So let me go ahead and sign in. Chugga, chugga, chugga. Cool. So let's start at a high level here. What you're going to notice is we have an app. An app is sort of analogous to a model here. And let me create a brand new app here. And I'm going to call this a basic booking service here. Now, you are going to notice the culture. And you'll notice that at the moment, it's a relatively limited set of entries that are in there. The biggest thing that the culture is going to help it with, besides language, is also going to be things like date format. Because of course, you know, everybody in the world does day, month, year. We have to be different, of course, in the US. I apologize. Anyway. So I've got that set up. Let me go ahead and hit done. And then now I'm presented with this cool little screen here. And over there on the left side, and this is where we're going to start off, I have our intents and I have our entities. You can think of your intents as the name of your method, if you were going to use programming terms. Or if you were going to use English terms, you could think of this as your verb. This is the action. At a high level, what is the user trying to do? The entities, going back to programming terms, are your parameters. These are the additional pieces of information that a user is trying to give to you for you to be able to act upon. So for my little booking app here, let's say that I want a brand new intent of create reservation. Double checking, make sure I spelled it correctly. Cool. I'm a typical developer. Don't have to spell correctly, you just have to spell consistently. So now what you're going to notice on create reservation is it's going to ask me to give it about 5 examples of what a user might say and hit enter. Now, for simplicity's sake, and just so we don't have to keep typing out entry after entry, I'm probably going to go with 3 or 4 just to get started here. But what I want to highlight is if you can give it closer to about 10, that's a great place to get started. The more, generally speaking, that you can feed it, the better. So I'll say, I want a table at, why am I blanking on a restaurant name? Pizza Hut, whatever. I want a table at Pizza Hut. I want a reservation for 2 people at Cucina Urbana. I want a reservation for 2 people on Tuesday. Okay, cool. That'll get me going. So what you're going to notice is as I put all of those in, those are the utterances. That is now my training data. This is now what I'm going to be using to help train up Lewis. Now, let me hit train. And then let me hit test over here. Now, this little testing panel over here is great for just kind of real quick, hey, I want to see how well I'm doing here. And so you'll notice kind of that normal, again, ML flow here. Give it some training data, test it. Give it some training data, test it. And I'll go in and I'll say, I want a table on Tuesday. There we go. Cool. And so what you'll notice is, sure enough, it gave me create conversation. So it figured out that my intent is create conversation. Wonderful. How about I go in and I say, hello. And now what you'll notice is that it will give me none. Now, none in Lewis is a special little bin. And none is designed to catch all of those different things that a user might say that you're not going to necessarily be able to act upon. And that might be things like greetings, or it might be, you know, whatever it is that a user might do. Now, while we're here, and we're talking about setting all of this up, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make when they come into Lewis is they try and get Lewis to be able to respond to everything. As of today, February 26th, yes? Okay, fantastic. As of today, February 26th, nobody has solved the Turing test. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be true on the 27th, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be true on the 28th. So trying to solve the Turing test, trying to make this so that it would be able to handle any possible utterance from a user is not going to happen. So when you're setting up your Lewis environment, go with a closed system. Know what it is that you want this to be able to solve, and then build from there. Okay. Now, from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Publish. And as of right now, Lewis gives me two spaces where I can publish out to. I can publish out to production, and I can publish out to staging. I'm going to make an assumption everybody here is familiar with production, staging, all that good stuff. Now, I'm going to be a little bit honest here. It's always a strange phrase. I'm going to be honest here. So if I've been lying up till this point, but now I'm going to be honest. And I'm going to let you know that Lewis, if you're looking for a full CI/CD model, isn't quite there yet, unfortunately. That it was built with the UI first. It's still very UI heavy. And so if you're looking for a full CI/CD, it's not there. You get little glimpses of it, you get little tastes of it, and we are going to talk a little bit about the API towards the end here, where you can then start to build your own, but if you're looking for that nice, rich experience that you might get with a product like App Services, for example, it's unfortunately not there yet. It's coming. It's not there yet. Okay. So I'm going to publish this out to production here. And if I go to manage, where do I want to be? Here we go. I want to be at keys and endpoints. They move things around me from time to time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on manage, keys and endpoints, and then right over here, I've got my endpoint, which I'm going to go ahead and click on. And the reason that I did that is because I want to hopefully help demystify Lewis. There's no magic here. And this is one of my favorite things about all of our cognitive services. There is no magic. That at the end of the day, the way that you call Lewis is just by building up a little bit of a URL and you're done. If you know how to make a fetch call in Node, if you know how to make a REST call, congratulations, you know how to call Lewis. That's all there is to it. So you'll notice that we've got the space where my Lewis has been deployed out to, my model's been deployed out to, the app ID, my time zone offset, and then the subscription key. That's the billing key. If you really feel like copying that down, fantastic. It's the free key. All that's going to do is just simply run that down to 0. You're not going to get anywhere with it. There it is. And then finally, you've got Q equals, and that's, of course, whatever it is that the user is trying to say. So now it's just simply, I want to make a reservation. And let me just paste that back into here. And now what you'll notice is I get back my JSON. Now, if I zoom out just a scotch here, I get a lot of great information from Lewis. So what it's going to tell me up at the very top is here's what you queried on. And then it's going to give me the top scoring intent, which is obviously the one that Lewis thinks is most likely. Then you're going to notice that it will list off every single intent that I have, every single verb. This is most likely what the user or what the user is trying to tell you. And it will give me on each one a score. Now, what jumps out at you about those scores? They don't add up to 1. And they will basically never add up to 1. So one of the things about the way that Lewis handles its internal scoring is based on a competition model. So it's really looking at each intent individually and scoring out each intent individually. So it's not ever going to add up to 1. If it does, it's just because that's happenstance. That's the perfect day to go buy a lottery ticket. That otherwise, what it's doing is it's going, hey, let me go ahead and see if this fits into create a reservation. We'll compare that against all the other ones. Let me go ahead and see how well this matches up to none. We'll match these all up to, or compare these to the other ones. And then it gives me a score for each one individually. Now, what that also in turn means is this. And this is another very common mistake that I see people make when they first get into Lewis, is they throw everything that they've got at one intent. Let's build up this one intent. Let's build up this one intent. Let's build up this one intent. And then they go, yeah, that's right. We need a second intent. So they'll put like 5 utterances into the second intent. And then they start asking, well, why isn't this one ever triggering? And the answer is basically you haven't given it enough to, as I like to put it, defend itself. That it's not strong enough. It hasn't seen enough for Lewis to go, oh yeah, that's probably belonging in that bucket. Now, if I was going to integrate this into any bit of code, if I was going to integrate this into a simple bot here, and I want default light, cool, okay. And there we go. And okay, cool. I'm doing the number one thing they teach all presenters to never do, which is live demos. So I'm going to apologize right now if any of this winds up going sideways. And theme, and let me go light. There we go. Okay. Oh, there we go. That's where my link is. Demo. Is that where I put it? You know, I'm always used to working in dark mode. And so as a result, the moment that everything is light, my normal eye cues are now gone. So when I'm going into Alt-Tab, I just can't see anything. API messages. There we go. And save and connect. And I really don't care where you put that. OK, cool. So my bot is now saying hello world to me, which is absolutely wonderful. So let me go in and add in a little bit of code here. If not, context dot activity type. If it doesn't equal message, and we'll just simply say return. Cool. So now we know we've got a message. So what I want to do is I'm going to say my Lewis message is going to be, how many people in here have done bot framework development? As I'm typing out, OK. Right. Cool. So let me try and do this real quick at a high level and hopefully get at least to a point where people can sort of understand what's going on. Again, my main focus is Lewis. What I really just want to demo with this is just the ability to take something from the user, send it to Lewis, and get a response back. That's all that I'm trying to do here. So what happens in Bot Framework is you're going to get an activity. Now, that activity could be a lot of different things. It could be, for example, if it's the case of like Skype, that the user is connected to the bot. So they haven't actually said anything. They've just simply connected to the bot. It could be that they've disconnected from the bot. It could be that the user is typing. So we get a lot of different types of activities. In my case, the only one that I'm interested in is message, which is the user has sent us a message. Pretty straightforward. So then from there, what I can do is I can go grab the user's text, whatever it is that they sent to me, and I don't know why you suddenly opened that up, but all right. There we go. Cool. And I'm going to encode that as a URI. Because again, they could have spaces and other funky little characters that aren't allowed in a normal URI. So let me build up my my Lewis root, and that is going to be what I had over here. Cool, cool, cool. And now let's go ahead and say const result equals fetch default and my Lewis root plus my Lewis message const JSON equals OK. So if we come back over here, what you're again going to notice is all this is going to do is it's just going to give me back a JSON object. And so on there, I've got my top scoring intent. I'll get the name of the intent. And in my case, I'm just going to send that back down to the user. So I'm just simply going to say send and my JSON data top scoring intent, make sure that I've got my naming correct. I do. Cool. Hit save. And now, in theory, cool. So it's picking all of that up. My whole purpose, and I'm not going to go back to the code again because there's not a lot of bot experience in here, but my whole purpose here was really just to highlight the fact. All you're doing is just making a REST call. If you know how to make a REST call, there you go. By the way, for anybody who's feeling overly pedantic, yes, I know technically that's not a REST call, that's an HTTP call. We'll move on. Okay. Let's come back over here and go one step further into entities. Entities are, again, all the additional pieces of information that a user might be sending along. Now, what you're going to notice is that they're going to come in a lot of different flavors. And at the very top here, actually, I'm going to go out of order. I'm going to go with the second one, which is pre-built. At that second instance, what you're going to notice is that we at Microsoft have set up a lot of pre-built entities for you to hopefully help solve difficult problems that everybody needs to deal with. For example, numbers, dates. How many people in here like parsing dates? Anyone? One person. Okay. So dealing with those types of things is a real challenge. And fortunately, Lewis has a pre-built entity all set and ready for me to go. So that what I can do, let me actually just bail out of this and go right to it, because I just love this one. Let me go back to build. Let me go to intents. Okay. Let me zoom in here real quick. And I'm going to go with that pre-built entity. Now, you're going to notice this little add pre-built domain entity over here. And I'm going to highlight that one by crossing it out. What that pre-built domain entity is there for is to help you bootstrap an application. Basically, this is some pre-baked samples that you could then set up your application from. And that's fantastic, I suppose. Now, if you're anything like me, and I know I am, you probably take those types of samples that you get, throw everything out, and start all over again. And I'm the exact same way. And in a lot of ways, those pre-built domain entities are the same thing. And so I'm not dogging on them themselves, but rather just trying to do something like that is very hard. And unfortunately, in the UI, you're going to notice add pre-built entity, add pre-built domain entity. The naming there is really subtle. The pre-built domain entity, samples. You can modify these if you so desire. I'll be honest, I literally never use them. The pre-built entities, however, j'adore, I love, always use. Now, with a pre-built entity, literally all I have to do is enable it. So if I want this to work with numbers, cool, I just make it work with numbers. And if I want this to work with dates, cool, I just simply enable dates. And now if I hit done, and let me train this and publish this back out. I love working with the JSON here on Thursday for 2 people. Now what you're going to notice is it's picked up those entities. I didn't do anything. I checked 2 boxes. I hit train, I hit publish. That's it. And what you're going to notice is it's now automatically picking up Thursday. When you turn on these pre-built, they work globally. And what I really love about them is the fact that it will then actually normalize this to the last and to the next that could potentially match that. So that way, if I need to go 3 weeks out or whatever it is, it's very easy for me to go ahead and work from here. So I get the last one, I get the next one, and then I can move forward. And what I also really love is the number. I don't need to sit down and build TWO equals 2. That's done for me. And again, all of this will come back as part of the JSON. That's cool. I think it's cool.
So
Yo.
Yeah, can you just explain again about the dates, the difference between those two? I didn't really get that.
These two here?
Yeah.
Oh, this is the one previous? Oh, sorry. Let me slide all the way back up. So what you'll notice is I typed in Thursday. So it picked up Thursday. And so now this is last Thursday, the 21st. This is next Thursday.
So if you were to give a prompt, I want to make a reservation in 3 weeks on a Thursday, will it still return the last Thursday?
Let's find out. I don't think it's going to be that cool, unfortunately. If I go in and I say, in 3 weeks on Thursday, I don't think it's going to be that cool. It gave me the in 3 weeks. It picked that up. And then it also picked up Thursday. So it would take a little bit of logic to build it from there. And you know, I'm gonna riff off of that for just a second here, because that's a great question. Is what you'll notice is Lewis did a decent job here, but it didn't get everything right. And you are going to notice that with anything that you build with, well, any ML model, or in particular with Lewis, is it's not going to get everything right. A, it's probabilistic. There's no text boxes, there's no calendar control, there's no button for a user to click on. I really can never know exactly what the user is trying to tell me. I can make a pretty good guess, but I'm never going to exactly know. So when you're building out your bot, you'll need to do a little bit of a round trip. Go back to the user and say, hey, is this what you meant? But the second thing is this, is Lewis has given me all the information that I would need. But it's given it to me in kind of an incomplete form. And that's again going to be very true, that what you'll typically need to do is take the information that Lewis gave you back and then start iterating over it to add more to add more values to it to figure out what's actually going on there. Okay. So back over here, and I'll do it this way. I have a peeve of people throwing up PowerPoint and not putting it into presentation mode. So it pains me to not do that, even though I keep having to hit escape to get out of it. All right, so we talked about pre-built, we talked about pre-built domain. You'll notice that we do have regex that's available, and I'm not going to talk about regex. I'm going to make an assumption that everybody in here has worked with regular expressions. And this is nice just in case you want to do everything in one fell swoop. A lot of times people will ask, well, couldn't I just write a regex statement and look at what the user said? Sure. But if you also need Lewis to do a little bit of work for you, being able to catch that all in one round trip is kind of nice. The big catch about a regex statement is that there is going to be no machine learning. If you want machine learning, this is where simple comes into play. Now with simple, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remember to hit escape. And then I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to say create new entity. I'm going to call this restaurant. Cool. And then I'm going to hit done. And now you'll notice that's all that it's given me. Restaurant. Simple. 0. Now I need to start training it. So let me go into my intents. And then right here, I'm going to click to mouse over Cucina Urbana and tell it, hey, that's a restaurant. And Pizza Hut, hey, that's a restaurant. Well, sort of. Make a reservation at, speaking of sort of restaurants. All right, I'm done. Anyway, there we go. Cool. So now what you're going to notice is that all of those have been flagged as restaurant here. And if I want to see the actual values, that's what that little icon over there does, is my entities view will show me, hey, these are the names of the entities that it's detecting. my tokens view, that will then show me all the various tokens. So now I go in, I hit train. Come on, there we go. I hit publish. And I want to make a res at McDonald's. Okay. And what you'll notice is it did a decent job. I probably threw it off by throwing in the apostrophe there, just because it hadn't seen it up until that point. But what you'll notice is that it's picking out McDonald's as a restaurant. Now again, it's doing that based on about 5 different sentences. And for a simple demo to a room full of people, this will work just fine. For production, you're probably going to need a few more. And I'll actually get into a little bit of how you can start to figure out what the user is actually saying a bit later. Okay. Let me kind of kick through a couple more things. So one other thing that you can do is you can start to expand out your entity types from there. And I'm going to talk about these just kind of at a real high level. I'll do a real quick demo of a composite entity in a moment. But you'll notice up at the very top is we have hierarchical. And the whole goal of a hierarchical is to add context. So if I was creating something where I said, hey, I want to go from Seattle to Amsterdam, that I could tell it, hey, Seattle and Amsterdam mean the same thing, but I just want to give it a little bit of additional context. That one of them is going to be the source, the other one is going to be the destination. Down at the very bottom, I've got my list, and my list is a hard-coded set of values with no machine learning. Now, this is another one where I see a lot of people go in, they start playing with this, and it's quite frequently a mistake. And it's not because the list in and of itself is a bad thing, it's that it's designed for a very specific small set of values. So for example, if you know that you only have 5 sizes, and that's all that you will ever have, that you will have extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large, 5. And that's all you're ever going to have, a list entity is perfect for that. But if you also needed it to pick up that somebody had said big, list entity isn't going to do that. If you needed to pick up typos, a list entity isn't going to do that. Now, fortunately, you can actually tell Lewis, hey, feed this into spell check as well, which can help clean some of that up. But list entities are very, very rigid. They're great for that short little set. They can be nice for bootstrapping, just getting things up and running. But for a lot of production apps, they're probably not what you want. In the middle there, though, is that composite entity. And what that composite entity allows you to do is it allows you to make things up from other entities. And this is especially helpful if you wanted to allow for a bit more of a complex phrase. So if I said, for example, and I know this is a little contrived, that I want a reservation from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. I'm getting there, I'm getting there. I was just making sure people were paying attention. And it worked, see? Okay, so what you're going to notice, you're going to do that to me. You're going to call that all one date time. I know what I'll do. I'll do it this way. Hold, please. So, yeah. I'm pretty sure I mentioned at the start of all of this that I was doing live demos, I was going to make a mistake. I realized I was going to make that mistake. Okay, yeah, so there was a lot of that. Create reservation, all right. Okay. All right, so, and let me just teach it real quick that that is a restaurant. Okay, this will actually work out just fine. Okay, so what I want to highlight here is you're going to notice that it has restaurant on date vtime 2 and restaurant on date datetime v2. Now, if I went ahead and I actually fired up the JSON, it would tell you exactly what you would expect at this point, which is that I've got a restaurant, I've got a date, I've got a restaurant, and I've got a date. And it would tell me the positions of all of those. And at that point, if I'm trying to piece all of that back together and figure out, okay, well, what date goes with what restaurant? It's a pain in the neck. It's a bit like trying to do string parsing. And again, how many people in here like doing string parsing? It's about what I expected. Okay. So if I go in and I wrap this up inside of a composite entity. So let me just click wrap and then mouse over and you'll notice that cool little green line there. And so now I'll say restaurant time. I'm going to put in a dash there. There we go. And so now it goes, okay, well, I see that there's a restaurant there. I see that there's a date v2 there. Cool. We'll create that. And then let's add in this one here as well. Wrap. Wrap. Boom. And boom. And then now with blinding speed and amazing accuracy, train, train, train. Publish, publish. I want to make a reservation at Urbana on Tuesday and Olive Garden on Wednesday. Hit enter. Okay, and we'll see how well this picks up everything together. Okay, cool. It did perfectly. Excellent. So I'm going to scroll down here, and what you'll notice is I now get a new set of JSON inside of here, that I get my composite entity. And so now what I can see is the individual children. More importantly is I get to now see that Tuesday goes with Cucina Urbana and Wednesday goes with Olive Garden. Pretty cool. If I scroll up here just to take a look at the intents, at the entities as they came through originally, it would have been here's Tuesday, here's Wednesday, here's Cucina Urbana, here's Olive Garden, and now it's up to you to try and piece all of that together. Love, love, love the composite entities and have that do that for me. Okay. I want... Yo.
What if you would say now I want reservation in Olive Garden on Wednesday and Tuesday?
So at that point, what it would most likely do here, we'll just type it in. Why you would want to go back on 2 days, I don't know.
It's not that great.
What it's most likely going to do, and I'm going to say it first and we'll see if I'm right, is it's going to tie the first one together as the composite, and then it's just going to have the second one floating. So I need logic to actually tie it there. So if we scroll on down, yeah. So it picked up the on Tuesday, but it didn't associate Wednesday because I hadn't trained it to look for that. I could go in and keep going from there. Like if I truly knew my users were going to say that, then I could go ahead and do that. Okay. Now,
Does the order matters? Like the date and then the location? If I change the date and the location, like Tuesday at the location, so do we need to create a new entity?
No, that you'd be able to do it either way. I don't know if it'll pick it up based on the training that I've given it. Tuesday at yeah, I don't think I've given it enough examples. Yeah, it hasn't seen it the other way, but you can train it to see it that way and just keep going. And actually, I'm going to spin right off of that question. I'm going to keep going with it because this will work out kind of nicely. So one of the challenges with building up any ML model is the fact that you need more data. You need more real-world data. And if any of us have learned anything about users, is that the moment that you think you've made something airtight, users will figure out a new way to break it. And so we want to see, well, what are the users actually typing in? So what I did is I came back to my Lewis model and I clicked on Review Endpoint Utterances. And this will give me every single utterance that a user has sent to the endpoint. Now, this does not include going to the little training pane that uses some like little behind the scenes thing, but it includes any endpoint reference. Now you might be looking at that, you might be thinking, hang on for a minute, Christopher. I didn't actually see you make any endpoint calls. But I did. I just did it through the browser. Lewis doesn't know any better. All that it knows is it got a GET request to that URL. So it says, oh, okay, cool. So now I can go in and use all of this information to help better train my model. So it will show me, hey, we had this right here. I want to make a reservation. It picked up that reservation restaurant on DateTime v2 and DateTime v2. So just what you said. So if I now wanted to retrain that and go, hey, this should really be, or you said it the opposite way. Do I have, where is that in here? Load more. You're in here somewhere. Did you wind up on none? It might just be taking it a minute. But anyway, what I could do in that case is it will eventually show up here, is I could then use that to help train the utterance. So like here, let me just go grab the McDonald's one here, and let me click on that. Let's say that that's now a restaurant, and then let's make sure that that's set for create. It is, and let me add it. And now, if I go back over here to my create reservation, and let me just go back into tokens view, now you'll notice that there's that McDonald's. So I took something that theoretically my user had typed in, and I'm now using that to train up my model. Quick side note here. As far as privacy concerns and all of that good stuff, I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be a lawyer, and I'm not going to offer you any advice on what to do with this. Go talk to somebody who's smarter about how to deal with user data that's coming in here and by default being stored, and figure out a plan from there. And I'll leave it at that. Okay. Now, the other thing that I want to mention here real quick is phrase lists. Now, what a phrase list allows me to do is it allows me to start just giving it some additional examples of things that users might say that are similar to one another without necessarily having to go in and create a whole bunch of utterances for it. So in my little example here, a phrase list could be perfect for some additional restaurants. And what I really like is this. Let me go in and say Olive Garden. And I'm not doing Olive Garden just to restaurants. There we go. And I'm not doing Olive Garden to pick on Olive Garden here. I'm doing it because I know that something cool is going to happen. So if I type in Red Lobster and I type in Pizza Hut, it will then go, hey, I think I've got some other things that are similar to that. And then I could go in and go, yeah, you know what, sure, that looks good, and Applebee's looks good, and whatever. And then I can say recommend. And so now what you'll notice, and it's doing a little bit of machine learning here, but it's also doing it based on a little bit of search data as well. So it's actually going out, it's doing a search, it's getting back some results, going, okay, I think these are the ones that fit. I think this is the direction that you're trying to point me at. And then I can continue to add those in, and that can help improve my scores from there. Now, down here at the very bottom is this little checkbox right here. And generally speaking, you want to just leave that checked. What it says is the values are interchangeable. And it's kind of a misleading text box. What it's really trying to say is, hey, this is also a restaurant, and this is also a restaurant, and this is also a restaurant. That at least when I read that, I see interchangeable as meaning the same thing. And one restaurant name doesn't necessarily mean another restaurant name. But in this case, because of the fact that they're both restaurants, they are interchangeable. You'll take that check out if, for whatever reason, you were putting in some values, but they weren't necessarily related to one another. I don't have a good example of that, I'll be honest with you. Okay, now that sort of leads perfectly, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit over to, I want, where is that slide here? Okay, so I'm going to finish out here, which is to talk a little bit about improving intent detection. And what you're going to notice with that first 2 bullet points, try creating small buckets, try creating big buckets, is you're working with an ML model. And so there are no absolutes. There is nothing that I can stand up here and tell you as a global rule will always work to help improve the performance of your Lewis model, with honestly the exception of one thing. The more data that you give it, like any ML model, generally speaking, the better that it's going to perform. Outside of that, you're going to have to play around with it. So when I approach Lewis, the first place that I will start is by creating big buckets. Rather than trying to be really finite with my intents, I'm just going to try and get Lewis to put me in the right ballpark. Because if it puts me in the right ballpark, and then it gives me the entities, I can typically programmatically from there figure the rest out. And that's perfect. But sometimes you're not going to be able to really get finite enough. Okay, fine. Then go in, rework your model, and go into small buckets. See how well that works. And if that doesn't work, try maybe playing around with some more entities. Try adding some more utterances. Try adding phrase lists. Try playing with that interchangeable flag. This is going to be an iterative process. You will have to go in and play around with it, because all of it's going to depend on what you're trying to do. All right. Questions on Lewis? Kind of a lot of information to try and get through in an hour. Yeah?
You just manually did the adding utterances to train the model?
Yes.
Is there a way to automatically do that?
That is a great question. So the question is there a way to automatically add the model? And the short answer to that question is yes. The longer answer is I wouldn't do it. So there is an API that you can use to go in and make modifications to your model. So it would theoretically be possible to go, hey, if you've seen something and you think that it's make a reservation, just go ahead and add that in and let's be done with it. But the problem is that if it's already making a bad decision, and you're basing it on what Lewis is telling you, and then you're just programmatically adding it back into the training data, exactly, yeah, you can have that bad loop right there. So it's theoretically possible, but it's not something that I would ever recommend, that you are going to want a human set of eyes on this. But I am going to tell you, though, that that set of eyes does not have to be a developer. That if I go back under Manage and I go to Collaborators, that I can add people in. This is designed for business owner, if you will, like advanced end users, to be able to go in and help you with your model. Yeah?
Is there no way to use customer feedback tracing IDs to get like a trained model for reinforcement learning? So,
How do you mean?
so if there's a conversation with a customer wants to make a restaurant.
Sure.
In the end, assess like, is this what you want? Then have positive feedback on Lewis to say like, hey, the customer actually meant this, so this is the right way.
So the question is, could you programmatically do it based on what the customer had said? And again, technically, yes. The challenge that you're going to run into is users clicking the wrong button from there. What I would recommend doing is instead, go through whatever the process is and then ask the user for feedback. Hey, was this what you were looking for? Yes or no? And I would say that universally, if you're using Lewis, if you're not using Lewis, because if you're using a bot, you've always got that probabilistic aspect to it. So you're never 100% certain unless you've given the user a button and they clicked on it, and then even then you're not still necessarily sure whether or not you got it right. So it's always a good idea to be asking the user for feedback. So what you could do is to log, this is what the user initially said, and then log whether or not they said yes, no, as to whether or not we match that, and then go ahead and allow a human to start going through that and going from there. So you could go ahead and again, automate that. I still get really nervous about doing that because it could be very easy to go in and start putting bad data into the model. Yeah?
Can we have a user-specific trained model? If a person is using it again and again for multiple purposes, then can we have a separate model for that user?
I mean, you could. I'm not sure that's something that I would necessarily do, but I mean, you could, because at the end of the day, all that you're doing is you're just creating another service, and you can, tie it to the same billing key, and it's just a different endpoint. And so I would just need some way to programmatically match. Oh, it's this user. This is the model we're going to call. But I think that's getting like too low level. That's getting too specific to one person. And I don't think that's really going to give you the experience that you're looking for. So you could, though. That would be something that you could do. Yeah.
What if I try to use it for a unknown language, but I have a lot of collaborator friends and a lot of examples? Will it try to be like a fuzzy search engine, or it just freaks out? So an unknown language, but a lot of examples.
An unknown language. Yeah. So I'm gonna answer this in two ways. So the first way that I'm going to answer this is in saying that if you're dealing with multiple languages, you'll typically want one model per language. If you're dealing with just like an unknown language or just like nonsense words, what you'll want to do is feed that into Lewis by using a phrase list. That's another great use for phrase lists. So if you're dealing with, like in particular, like technical terms or medical terms and things like that, that you wouldn't see in normal day-to-day use, then you could train that up with a phrase list. But I would also say, kind of going one step further, that the biggest differences that the language and culture, or the language option, is going to make inside of Lewis is based on how it's going to break down your sentence and what it's going to know about the vernacular. For that. So for example, like word breakers and punctuation and things like that, how it handles that is going to be based on the language. So if you started throwing in like different languages, that's probably going to wind up making a mess out of things. But what that also means is if you are using words that aren't typically in the vernacular, Lewis is, especially if you're using phrase lists, gonna very likely be able to handle that okay, because it's not constrained to only 5,000 English words or something like that. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah.
Is it possible to import the whole data set of sentences all at once?
Yeah. So can you import in everything all at once? Back over here on version. So one of the things that you can do is I can check this and then hit export, and I'll get a JSON file down. And then I could go ahead and add in whatever it is that I wanted and then upload all of that back in. Or I can also, let me just check away. There you go. Import in from there. I could also do that from the main screen as well. Like when I go to create a brand new app, I can just upload all of my JSON that way. So if for whatever reason you think it's going to be easier just to programmatically go at it, then you can go ahead and do that. I will say along those lines that when it comes to like true source control, right now that doesn't exist inside of Lewis per se. That as you all saw, that if you're wanting to protect your model, the best thing that you can do is just export out the JSON. Now, what I have seen some organizations do, and I know this is now going well beyond what you asked, but I still think it's useful information. What I have seen some organizations do is they'll actually just set up two different Lewis models, have one that's truly their production, and have one that is their dev environment. And so they'll then export out all of the untrained utterances from their production, import that into their dev, start training all of that up, get that ready, test it, make sure that it works. Once they know that it works, cool. Now let's export it from here and re-import it from the re-import it into the production. So it's doing that normal like slot swapping that you would see in a normal environment, but just having to do it manually. Yeah.
Version is the model and the training. If you export, you see the model and the training.
You'll see the model and all of the utterances. To get the utterances that have not yet been assigned, the last that I heard, you have to go to the API for that. So that button right there, unfortunately, won't get you what is in here. So anything that hasn't been assigned, that you won't get when you export the JSON, but you can get that through an API call.
Would you be able to export it through the API, like make every hour a snapshot of it or something?
Yeah, you could absolutely do that. Just as I want to make sure that we don't mess anything up. Absolutely. Yeah, you could do that.
You always can go back.
Yep. Yeah. And I think there was a question in the back.
I was curious about that. I was looking it up in the meantime. I was curious about languages supported now, to what extent?
At the moment, that's what I got.
Question.
Yeah.
Does it also give other suggestions, for instance, in case of restaurants, if you select a different language? So you selected English, and it used a lot of US restaurants, I think.
It was no, so it was going on US restaurants just because that's what I was giving it. But if I went in and I did something like this, let me all right. think that's right. Whoops. Hold on. Nope, I'm apparently spelling it something wrong here. Oh, thank you. Yeah. There you go. So yeah, so it will pick up then that I'm typing in. I'm assuming that's what it is over on the right hand side. That it's Japanese cities. So, can anybody confirm that? What's that? Okay. Cool. More questions? They say when you ask an open-ended question that it takes 3 seconds to acknowledge that a question was asked, 3 seconds to come up with a response, and then 3 seconds to build up the guts to say it out loud. So that's why I internally actually count to 9.
Can I import labeled data? So if I already have a data set which is labeled, I mean, like for entities, can I upload that to?
You could do that through the API. There isn't, there isn't like an import mechanism where I could just feed it like a CSV or a TSV file and have it go from there. It'd be great if it could, but sadly no. Yep. Yeah.
Can you explain a little more
The
the roles?
roles. So the goal of a role, let me see. There we go. So the name hierarchical is a bit of a misnomer. Because the way that it makes it sound is that you're creating a parent-child relationship, and that's actually not what you're doing. What you're doing is you're trying to provide a little bit more information, a little bit more context about what the user is trying to say. So that if the user said something like, I'm trying to go from Seattle to Amsterdam, they're giving me the same type of value. They're giving me 2 city names. And if that's where I left it, then that would be it. And it would then be up to me to try and figure out, okay, well, which is the from and which is the to. With the hierarchy or the hierarchical entity, what I can then do is I can say source, and then I can say destination. And now, and I'll just build this up real quick. Intent and okay. So now you'll notice that when I go into market, it shows me then source, and then it shows me then destination. And then now when I go in and I see the JSON of the result, it's going to be able to flag both of those as location, but then also flag it as, in this case, source and destination. So that's really what it's used for, is if I know that somebody is going to use the same type of entity multiple times in the same sentence, and I need to be able to flag a contextual difference between them, that's what hierarchical is for. In this case, yes. Because if all that I was trying to do, like if I said I wanted to go to Seattle on Thursday, I can combine those into one giant entity using the composite. And then I would know that one's the date, one's the who's and what's at the city, just based on that. That I don't need any additional information from Lewis once it's tied those together for me. Hierarchical allows me to deal with a scenario where I've got two pieces of the same type of information, but based on context, they're going to be used in a slightly different fashion. You're welcome. Yeah?
So in case they say a sentence and then there's some missing entities, is there any way in the JSON result that you know which entities are missing?
No. Unfortunately, there isn't a way that you can say, I need certain entities to be required or anything like that. They sort of had like a little implementation of that in a very, very early version, but it was a clunky implementation, and they had other things they wanted to do. So they put that to the side, and it hasn't unfortunately come back.
I guess it was in the conversation designer or conversation builder that they had something like that.
It might have been there, but that would have been something that wouldn't have just been Lewis based. That would have been something on top of Lewis. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was wondering, can you still tag something that's just a location now, or do you always need to specify that it's either a source or a destination?
I don't think. There you go. Yep. Easy way to answer the question. Other questions? Yeah.
So back to the beginning of your talk.
Yep. My name is Christopher. My Twitter handle is Geek Trainer.
How many languages? Not that. So what if the sentence is coming in 3 different messages? Like I want to travel, I want ticket from Amsterdam to Seattle, like 4 messages.
Okay, so if the user is already breaking things down into multiple sentences, then it's going to be up to you to figure out how you want to handle that. So typically, most scenarios, that if a user is sending you partial information, they're not going to be proactive about following up and sending you more information. So that typically what would happen is a user would simply say, I want to go to, or I want to book a trip. Period, end of sentence. So now what will happen is Lewis will just give me back, oh, okay, this is the intent, but it won't give me back any entities. So then inside of code, I will then start parsing out, all right, well, I didn't get any entities. Let me start from the top and then start asking the user from there for the individual values. Now, what you decide to do from there is kind of up to you. If you want to feed that back into Lewis, or if you want to instead start doing search based on that. So specific, let's say the user says, I want to make a reservation. I say, fantastic, what restaurant? I'm expecting at that point that the user is just going to type in either the name of the restaurant or maybe a little bit of like garbage noise word at the very beginning and then the name of the restaurant. So I can handle that in one of 2 ways. One very easy way that I can handle that is just, here's the list of noise words that the user is going to put at the very beginning. If I see any of those, cool, I'm just going to delete those, and then let me take the value and put that off to my search engine of restaurants. Because Lewis is not a search engine. So it's not going to be able to tell you whether or not Red Lobster exists, for example. All that it's going to be able to tell you is the user said Red Lobster, and I think that's a restaurant. So then it's up to you to go that one step further. So again, kind of keeping specific to that case, I would just go ahead and either just take the full phrase, throw that into my search engine. Chances are, if it's a decent search engine, it's going to throw out the noise words anyway, and then give me back the right result. With the date, just because of the fact that the date parser in Lewis is so fantastic, I will still throw that back to Lewis and let Lewis convert that for me. So again, kind of going back to that flow, I want to make a reservation. Fantastic, what restaurant? Red Lobster, what night? And then go from there. So that's the way that I would handle that. More questions? You're all internally counting to 9, aren't you? Cool. That's Lewis.